We are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Reverend Bill Bichsel and Susan Crane. Bill Bichsel is a reverend in Tacoma, Washington, and Susan Crane is from Baltimore, Maryland, with Jonah House there, and they are both two of the 5 Disarm Now Plowshares 5 face sentencing this coming Monday for nonviolent direct action at the naval base Kitsap Bangor Trident nuclear subbase. Direct action took place on November 2nd of 2009. Bix and Susan, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start out, talk about the action that you did on November 2nd, 2009, and why you did that.
Well, it was on, as you say, it was on the Feast of All Souls, and we had discerned a long time about the action itself, and we decided that this was really the citadel of these weapons of ultimate destruction, and we felt pretty well called to do that, to get into where they were. And so basically we, the 5 of us on that evening, on that morning, I guess, early morning, we cut through the perimeter fence, and then we're on the base for about 3.5, 4 hours. When we came to Swift Pack, that is Strategic Weapons Pacific, where that's the area designated. It's what they call a limited area, and lethal force area, lethal force authorized, but there are 2 fences there guarding where the nuclear weapons are stored. And we were carrying banners that said Disarm Now Plowshares. And also we're carrying some of our own blood as symbols that enough blood has been spilled already. And so we were able to cut through the first fence and then cut through the second fence and get into where the weapons actually were. I certainly was very surprised, and I think we all were, to have penetrated that deeply into where these idolatrous weapons stand, the citadel of ultimate death.
So we went there for various reasons, and one of them is that we know that people in this country want disarmament. There's been poll after poll taken, and the last one that I was able to find says that about 2/3 of the people, at least in this country, want nuclear disarmament. And there's all these people, we all want nuclear disarmament, and yet our government continues to pour billions of dollars into building more nuclear weapons. Just for example, there's $70 billion going to be spent on building a whole new fleet of Trident submarines. And it always surprises me, when I think about that, because when you go to vote, you've got to vote on bond issues. So if you want a new library or a new school or big changes made in libraries, schools, if you want a fire engine, all these things you have to vote on as a bond issue. But we never get to vote on, do we want a whole new fleet of Trident submarines?
Right.
I think if we got to vote on that, the people would say, no, we don't want to spend $70 billion on that. But we never get that chance. So I think it's the will of the American people to begin disarmament of these weapons. And the politicians talk about disarmament, but and in fact we have reduced the number of nuclear weapons that we have. But when you really look at disarmament, it isn't happening, because we're spending more and more money on new plants like the Y-12 plant, the Kansas City plant. All this money is going into research, development, and production of more nuclear weapons.
Some people would say, criticizing your action, well, why didn't you, go to Washington, D.C. and lobby there?
Well, for I guess for all of us, for over 35 years, we've been using kind of conventional ways of trying to raise our voice, trying to seek redress for grievances, as the Constitution, enables and empowers and encourages us to do. And our Congress and our administration is so tied into the nuclear and to the corporate war-making industry, we've been on a war economy for 70 years, and they are so tied into that there's never a reduction in the defense budget. There's never a reduction in the refurbishing of nuclear weapons, as what's going on at Oak Ridge and the new plant being built in Kansas City, and also the new pit production going on at Los Alamos, and contrary to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But anyway, so our Congress is so tied into it to try to petition them, so forth, is in no way at all will anyone, for fear of being unpatriotic, will they take a stance, any of some, there's a few, but for the most part, it's a pretty understanding that is a sacred cow. And so, in effect, the way it comes to me is our Congress, our administration, they will embrace cruise missiles and Tomahawk missiles and drone aircraft, while children in Afghanistan and Iraq and in Pakistan die in the sands. You know, they will embrace the weapons over the lives of these innocent people. And by doing this also, there's the billions and billions going into, is causing deep death among other people, throughout our own nation, resources that should be going into healthcare, into education, into housing, into employment, into food. It's more and more is that being cut back in order that the defense budget might thrive. And then it's those corporate, if you want to greed, corporate citadel of greed, that's where it's going.
Because I know you both have a long history of doing these type of direct actions and this work. Tell us about some of the other corporations that are involved in this.
Well, one that first comes to my mind is Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin in Sunnyvale, California, that's where the D5 missiles are made. They're made in segments, and in fact, the Pacific Life community just had a retreat near there, and there was a vigil and an action at Lockheed Martin where several of us, including Father Steve Kelly and myself, went on to the Lockheed property to say, no more building of weapons, no more building of D5 missiles, no more death dealing in our name. They were very unprepared for us, although we had told them we were coming, and we were able to walk right into the complex, the corporate complex. We had a letter we were trying to deliver to the administration, but we didn't get quite there. We were arrested before we got there. But Lockheed Martin is one of the biggest defense contractors, and it just lobbies in Washington for everything it wants and gobbles up as Bix was saying, gobbles up the money that rightfully belongs to the poor and to middle America.
So you take this action at great risk to yourself. You're walking into this facility where clearly there are signs saying that they will use extreme force against you. So what are you really trying to accomplish here? I mean, clearly you didn't stop the Trident system there at Bangor.
Yeah, to me, if I just from my own religious experience, something like that, and when I speak, I speak from my Christian Judaic tradition, but I honor deeply people who work for peace from other traditions or those who have no particular religious tradition. They're out of their deep humanitarian call to that peace is the way. And so, but speaking from my own, it was very important for me, and I think for us, to be there as witnesses to the nonviolent, transformative love of God, which is revealed through Jesus. And it was important to physically be there near those idols, as happened before with Isaiah and others, that it was important to be there, and to, in a sense, to condemn them, to say this is anti-human, and to trust more in the transforming power of the love of God, to be a witness to that these things of death can, in certain ways, they can be changed into things of life. The hearts that, the human hearts that are now opting for this or saying these hearts also could be changed or can be changed, but to believe more in the power, the nonviolent power of God being there than in the power of ultimate destruction, which the nuclear weapons represent. You know, and so for me it was important to witness, to be there, to witness to that. You know, and I was so, we all experienced joy once, you know, even after being arrested and cuffed and down on the ground and hoods placed over our head, but there was, no one really felt any deep fear. There's just one other thing I'd like to just say on one of the things that they accused us of is, well, what if one of the Marines or one of the soldiers, what if they had shot us, and then think of the trauma that would have been caused to that person. All I can say is in living out a life of nonviolence, which we try to do, you know, we have to work at it. There's no point at which you never say, I've arrived, it's there. You have to keep working at it. You have to keep forgiving one another, and you keep screwing up, but you try and keep trying. But there is a certain aura that comes with trying to live that. Live nonviolence, you know, such as Gandhi, through his living and through his bringing that and transferring that to his other people, they were able to bring about the freedom of India. Or how Martin Luther King, through his nonviolence, was able to bring out and sort of begin to expose the deep racial issues that were in America. You know, or how Dorothy Day, the founders of the Catholic Worker, you know, by her refusing to go into the park, you know, her nonviolence saying, no way, nuclear war, you know, there's no way, there's no defense against nuclear war. You know, there's absolutely, the only thing is you got to get rid of the nuclear weapons. But anyway, all I wanted to say is about that nonviolence is something that I think they felt, the Marines and soldiers, I think they relaxed their weapons that at first had been trained on us, but then right away they saw us, and I think they were relaxed. But all I can say is that through the power of nonviolence that we walk in, that we're responsible for not killing people. We take the responsibility for people not being killed. We don't take the responsibility for killing. That's not our responsibility for killing that would happen, you know. We can only trust in our belief in non-killing and take responsibility to try to live that out.
Talk a bit about the trial, because I haven't had the opportunity to talk directly with those of you that were facing sentences, which again are coming up here on Monday. What happened during the trial? What did you hope to happen during the trial? Tell us about that.
Well, we had a jury trial, and leading up to the jury trial, we had many hearings with the judge where we talked about various motions. And during that pretrial time, the judge made several decisions. And those decisions, I feel, were very unfair and stopped us, made it so we couldn't have a fair trial. The judge decided, for example, that we couldn't use international humanitarian law, that we couldn't talk about how the nuclear weapons at the Trident base are illegal. And indeed, they are illegal. They're indiscriminate weapons. They can't distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. They kill, if they're ever used, whole cities at a time. Everyone in the city would die, would be vaporized. They're horrendous, terrible weapons. Their use is hardly possible for us to even imagine what their use would mean. But anyway, we couldn't talk about that. Those weapons, we couldn't talk about how they're illegal, and they're illegal under military law, under U.S. law, and under international law treaties that the United States is part of, which becomes the law of the land under the U.S. Constitution. Further, we couldn't use the necessity defense, which was an affirmative defense that should have been allowed to us. That's the simple defense that says if there's danger to life, you can do what would otherwise be seen as illegal to save the person's life. And further, we brought all sorts of evidence that there were nuclear weapons at the base, and the judge would not take judicial notice that there were weapons at the base. So throughout the trial, they said they'll neither confirm nor deny that there's weapons there. So it was, I mean, we had testimony from admirals in the Navy about the nuclear weapons there, and the judge just was blind, willfully blind to acknowledging the fact that there's weapons at the base. So we did not have a fair trial, and it did end up being, did they walk onto the base? Did they cut fence? And if they did, you have to find them guilty. And it was very, very difficult to be in that situation where we wanted to tell the truth. I told the judge several times, Judge, I just want to tell the truth. You know, the court made it very hard. And it was very hard on some of the jurors who came to, one of them came to us afterwards and was definitely distraught because they were pushed into a decision that they might not have made if they had been able to hear what actually happened. If we had been able to put forward a defense, I think we wouldn't be facing sentencing right now.
So you await sentencing on Monday from the trial, and it's the same judge that you'll be speaking with?
Yes. Judge Settle. Judge Benjamin Settle was the motions judge, the trial judge, and now he's going to be sentencing us.
So with a court system that, A, doesn't let you talk about your motives, which, again, seems extremely odd, as well as doesn't acknowledge that there are weapons at a nuclear facility, nuclear weapons at a nuclear facility, what are you anticipating for your sentencing?
We've heard from the probation department, the federal probation department, and from the federal U.S. attorney, Arlen Storm, and they're suggesting a range of sentences for all of us. All of them include 3 years of supervised release, which is a very difficult thing for many of us. It means we can't see each other, we can't raise our voice and protest, go on a military base for 3 years. But more than that, they're asking prison time of all of us, ranging from 6 months prison and 6 months home confinement, where you make your own home a prison, to 36 months prison time.
And you knew walking into this that you would be facing this, so... And you've also you've done actions like this before, haven't you? Both been in prison before.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And as Susan well pointed out, as she stated too in court, you know, it's really hard to tell the truth here. You know, I mean, in a court of justice, it's like a gag order on the truth. You know, it's trying to get that out, and all sorts of gymnastics you have to go through. But as Susan pointed out, in the whole system there, the judge went with what all federal judges seem to do. They go by precedent. You know, they follow down what has happened before. You know, and you get a whole set. You get a whole set of legalisms that are sort of binding, but you don't ever get a sense of justice happening in this court. You know, the whole sense of justice is something. That whole thing was just kind of reduced. Did you cut into the fences? Which, as Susan said, yeah, of course we did, and we had to get in there. We had to we had to witness to the truth. We had to witness to the power of nonviolent love, you know, in some way, and be near to those idols to do that. But those things to get in there to a sense of real justice happening, it doesn't. And I haven't experienced that, at least. And I'm not, you know, I think he's a good man as far as I know. He's right on, you know, but he's caught in that system, you know, and where do you seek redress, you know, when your Congress and your administration is tied into the war industry, and the courts go along with that as well, you know, and I just think, when are we going to stop, you know? the schools closing in Seattle, roads being ripped up, parks going, libraries going. These are just some of the minor things, but people, welfare reductions that are happening, though more people on the streets, more people with mental illness needing things. And then in our world, the global world, they're all living under a certain fear and hopelessness that comes, I think, from our nuclear weapon stance, that comes especially from the United States. We have to take responsibility. And when are we going to do that? When are we going to say enough?
We went on the base to take personal responsibility for the weapons, to say, I live in this country, I'm responsible for these nuclear weapons that our country has, and I'm going to say no to them and try to begin to disarm them in some symbolic way. So I think that's so important for all of us to take personal responsibility. And, and it's so normal for us to get into a job, to get into a role, to put on a uniform of some sort, and then to say, well, I don't really agree with the policies or the agreements of this institution, but this is my job. I have to do it this way. And I think the minute we say, well, I'm not going to take personal responsibility, I'm going to do what my orders are, that's when we end up doing things that we wouldn't ordinarily do. And whether it's no matter what our job is, I think it's important for us to say, I'm taking personal responsibility for my actions, and I'm not going to do anything that's against my conscience. And I would hope that the judge, even though he has his robes on, would do that when he sentences us on Monday. I hope all of us, whether we have a uniform of some sort, or whether we just have a job, or whether we're in a community, that we each time we make a decision, we think, is this really in line with my conscience?
Right.
So if they gave you instead of the recommended penalties, if they gave you the maximum penalties for this, would it still be worth it?
Well, for me, yes. We're living in a death-dealing culture, in a death-dealing empire, and I think I feel that it's very important to say no to the nuclear weapons that threaten all life on Earth.
Right, and I feel very strongly too, as Susan. It not only is it worth it, I feel honored and privileged and commissioned to be able to do that, and to be able to be with the four people. It wouldn't have happened, I don't think, unless there were us, that combination. Certainly, if I were alone, it never happened like that. But there was that. But I am so thankful for that action, for that to be able to, in a sense, address the real idolatry that's there. And it not only is it worth it, I feel very privileged, honored, and I hope to continue, so come whatever on this, but steep to the Archbishop Hunthausen years ago when he was here, he termed the Trident submarine base, the Bangor submarine base, with their Trident destructive force, he termed it the Auschwitz of the Northwest, or the Puget Sound. And I can only agree with that just wholeheartedly, And so that, as was brought up, the analogy, would we let people who are condemned to death behind the gates of Auschwitz, if we had a chance to do anything, would we try to liberate them? I think we have to be liberated in the United States, and as Susan said, I think we have to start taking steps and responsibility, for the lives of one another. And I think there's a special responsibility for us in this area, inasmuch as the Trident submarine base is in our backyard. It's on our Puget Sound. It's our beloved Hoods Canal, which has been turned into a military pond. Do we want this You know, is this what this is intended to be? Where even the dolphins are being trained now to be watch guards and so forth, guarding nuclear weapons, something that doesn't come by them by their own instincts of being a dolphin. So, yes, I think there's a lot of ramifications to this. We've got to say no.
So we, on Monday morning, there'll be a vigil ahead of time at 8 in the morning, and then we're going to go into the courtroom, Sister Ann Montgomery and Lynn Greenwald and Father Steve Kelly and Bix and myself, and we're going to go into the courtroom for sentencing in the same spirit that we went on to the base and the same spirit that we went into the court for our trial. And that's the spirit of nonviolence, the spirit of love and compassion, and with hope in our hearts.
And I guess we'd like to invite any who might be listening that, you know, to it's on the 28th. It's going to be at the Tacoma Federal Courthouse, which is at 1717 Pacific Avenue in Tacoma. There's going to be a vigil before the sentencing time. There'll be a vigil starting at 8 o'clock outside where we'll pray and sing together, after which time you know, there'll be those who going into the courtroom. So we invite any that wish or can make it to come. It would be a wonderful witness, we think. And prior to that, on Sunday, we're having a festival of hope down at St. Leo's Church in Tacoma, in the Catholic Community Services Building, which is right next to the church. There's going to be a potluck beginning at 5:30. And then afterwards, we'll go into the church where there'll be music, a great Irish band, and the St. Leo's music section, and speakers. Bishop Tom Gumbleton is coming from Detroit, and we have other speakers who will be there. We invite you to come to join in us in this celebration of hope and Festival of Hope.
Yes, and we're hoping to hear a few words from Ramsey Clark, too.
Oh, good.
He'll be there for the Festival of Hope and also be testifying for us in the courtroom, as will Bishop Tom Gumbleton.
And I believe Ramsey Clark came during your trial as well. Was he allowed to?
Yes, he spoke before the trial. We were trying to encourage the judge to allow us to talk about humanitarian international law, but the judge was not encouraged enough.
And Ramsey Clark being the former U.S. Attorney General, is that correct?
Yes.
Was not allowed in your trial. Okay. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time, but we should mention there's also a website that people can follow.
Yes, it's the Disarm Now Plowshares.wordpress.com. But also, for someone who might be listening this morning, join us out at the base. We're going out to the base today. We're going to meet at Ground Zero around 12:30 and walk from there to the main gate. We'll be at the main gate between 1 and 2. There'll be music and a litany. It's Lent and other things, readings.
Very good. Well, with that, we're unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you both for coming and spending time with us today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.